Legislative Resolution number 918 by Senator Griffo, memorializing Governor Andrew M. Cuomo to proclaim May 2013 as Lupus Awareness Month in the state of New York. Whereas each year the lupus agencies of New York State designate May as Lupus Awareness Month to show support for the 105,400 New Yorkers, 1.5 million Americans, and 5 million people worldwide who suffer from the often debilitating effects of lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease that can cause severe damage to the tissue and organs in the body, and in some cases, death. And whereas each year thousands of people are newly diagnosed with lupus, the great majority of whom are young people in the prime of their lives, and 90% of whom are women. Whereas lupus is most prevalent among African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, Asians, and tragically, thousands of people die from lupus each year because a cure remains elusive. And whereas many health professionals are unaware of symptoms and health effects of lupus, causing people with lupus to suffer for many years before they obtain a correct diagnosis and medical treatment, demonstrating the need for increased public and professional awareness of lupus. And whereas medical research efforts into lupus and the discovery of safer, more effective treatments for lupus patients are underfunded in comparison with diseases of comparable magnitude and severity. And whereas increasing community awareness and focusing public attention on lupus and its devastating impact on patients' lives will provide hope for a better future for those affected. And whereas the lupus agencies of New York State are dedicated to improving the quality of life for individuals with lupus and their loved ones by providing education, support, and outreach services and promoting programs of awareness, advocacy, and research. And whereas this legislative body recognizes the needs of those chronically ill people who are living with lupus and urges all citizens to support the search for a cure and assist those individuals and families who deal with this devastating disease on a daily basis. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this legislative body pauses its deliberations to memorialize Governor Andrew M. Cuomo to proclaim May 2013 as Lupus Awareness Month in the state of New York, and be it further resolved that copies of this resolution suitably engrossed be transmitted to the Honorable Andrew M. Cuomo, Governor of the state of New York, and the lupus agencies of New York State.
Senator Savino, on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, there's been a lot of discussion around the Capitol for the past few weeks about women's equality, and talking about where women are underrepresented in certain areas, or underpaid, or undertreated. But here today we're going to talk about an issue where there's an overrepresentation of women, and that is in the disease of lupus. On May 10th, for World Lupus Day, more than 100 organizations around this state will be demonstrating or observing Lupus Awareness Month. And there'll be all sorts of activities about what people can do to participate and learn more about lupus. A few years ago, when former Assemblywoman Aurelia Green was still in the Assembly, she approached me to talk to me about lupus. And quite frankly, as a woman who was, you know, certainly not a child anymore, I really did not know that much about the disease of lupus and how devastating it was to women. And in the work that I did with her and then translated it into the work with Assemblywoman Vanessa Gibson, who succeeded her in many ways, continues to work on this issue, we partnered with organizations here in New York State to raise awareness for lupus. And along the way, I found out that lupus disproportionately affects women, and particularly women of color and young women. And even more importantly, that most women don't know what the signs or symptoms of lupus are, and as a result of it, they can go years without being diagnosed. And that lack of appropriate diagnosis can lead to all sorts of problems, including infertility problems, and including chronic pain and debilitating conditions that affect their entire life and their entire family. So we introduced legislation that would require the state of New York to develop a lupus education and prevention outreach program. We want to put a checkoff box on your income tax return so that you can donate a particular amount of money towards that education fund, so young women can find out about this disease, they can speak to their doctors about it, they can be appropriately diagnosed, they can get treatment earlier rather than later, and that's what lupus awareness is all about. And I'm very happy to stand here and speak on this resolution. And I know we have some advocates here. They're in the corner, led by Kathleen Arntsen, who's been working very hard for several years to help pass this legislation here in New York. We've seen some improvements in Washington. The FDA, stand up, Kathleen. The FDA 2 years ago, finally approved the first new drug for the treatment of lupus in 50 years. But we are way behind in the treatment of this disease, and the most important component in the treatment of this disease is education. So I want to thank you ladies for coming to Albany, for your advocacy every year, and I hope everyone will support this resolution and support the legislation that will help put the intent of this resolution into the full effect of the law. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Savino. Senator Serrano on the resolution.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I also want to lend my voice to what my colleagues are saying about the importance of lupus awareness, and I want to thank Senator Savino, Senator Griffo, and Assemblywoman Vanessa Gibson, who's joining us in the chamber today, for their leadership on this issue. The communities that I represent in the South Bronx and in East Harlem have some very high numbers of lupus, and probably many, many more that aren't diagnosed. And it's a very insidious disease and very difficult to diagnose and very debilitating, and it has many, many negative effects throughout the community. So I think it's a shame that there isn't more attention being paid on a national level to lupus research and more money and more funding for innovative treatments. But I think that the fact that this Senate body comes together every year to honor this resolution, to fight against this disease, does send a very strong message that we have to do something urgently to deal with the growing cases of lupus in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Serrano. We welcome the Assemblywoman and the advocates. This resolution was previously adopted on March 19th. Senator Fusillo.